Mortal Kombat has spent 30 years creating some of the most iconic fighters in gaming history, but it's also produced characters so universally despised that their own creators have spent decades apologizing for them. From lazy clones that insulted player intelligence, to broken spam mechanics that destroyed competitive integrity, to serial killers who murdered fan favorites just to generate cheap heat. Today, I'm ranking the 8 most hated characters in Mortal Kombat history, from the merely disliked to the absolutely despised. And trust me, the top spot earned its crown through 20 years of developer humiliation. Jacqui Briggs is the only character on this list who's actually good at fighting games, but nobody cares. She debuted in Mortal Kombat X as Jax's daughter and immediately landed dead last in every popularity poll. An MK Online survey ranked all 9 MKX newcomers, and Jacqui scraped the bottom with just 3.4% of the vote. A GameFAQs thread titled "Jacqui Briggs is the worst MK character ever made" ran 13 pages deep with players tearing into her design. Here's the problem. She's boring. Aggressively, offensively boring. Players called her FemJax because that's exactly what she is. A military fighter with gauntlet punches and a roster already drowning in Special Forces characters. Her concept art showed way more interesting designs, rebel aesthetics, and agent looks. But NetherRealm went with generic soldier number 7. One user perfectly captured the frustration by saying she has the most generic appearance ever seen in Mortal Kombat, and the least exciting gimmick, real-life martial arts, and that's it. But wait, it gets worse. Her story mode chapters in both games revolved entirely around Jax's PTSD, instead of developing her own identity. Her MK11 arcade ending has her literally erase herself from existence to save her father. Even her own conclusion is about someone else. Among the 4 combat kids, she ranked dead last every time. Takeda had whip blades and Kenshi's lineage. Cassie inherited Johnny's charisma. Kung Jin brought archery and a compelling character arc. Jacqui brought gauntlets and daddy issues. The cruelest irony is that competitively, Jacqui dominated MK11 as a top 3 character, appearing in tournament top 8s constantly. Players who hated her design were forced to watch her win. She was excluded from MK1 and the community barely noticed, but at least she was functional. Unlike the character who literally couldn't even rip off Kano correct. Jarek exists because Midway needed a Black Dragon representative in Mortal Kombat 4, and Kano wasn't available. Their solution was breathtakingly lazy. They took Kano's already programmed moveset and slapped a different face on it. IGN summarized his entire existence in one devastating sentence: Jarek is a poor man's Kano, simple as that. Every signature move was stolen intellectual property. The cannonball roll, the heart rip fatality, even the eye laser beam. That last one created an unintentional lore catastrophe that nobody at Midway seemed to notice or care about. Kano's eye laser makes sense because he has a cybernetic eye implant. Jarek has no cybernetic eye. He's fully organic. Nobody bothered explaining why a regular human was shooting lasers from his face. CBR called this out directly, saying, besides the fact that these didn't make sense since Jarek wasn't a cyborg, Jarek was painfully unoriginal. But here's where it gets weird. Jarek's legacy, the only reason anyone remembers him at all, has nothing to do with his gameplay. It's his legendarily terrible voice acting in Mortal Kombat 4. In Jax's ending, Jax holds Jarek over a cliff by the throat. What follows is gaming's most gloriously awful dramatic scene.
You can't drop me. You have to uphold the law. You have to arrest me. Wait, this is brutality. You can't do it.
Jax responds,
Wrong, Jarek. This is not a brutality. This is a fatality.
Then Jarek emits the most inhuman scream ever recorded in a fighting game, phonetically transcribed by fans. The community turned it into one of MK's most enduring memes. That scream became Jarek's entire identity. TV tropes also designated him the poster boy of uninspired fighters, who only exist to fill an arbitrary new character quota. He appeared in MK4, got killed off, and has never returned except as a punchline in worst character discussions. At least Jarek was meant to be a real fighter. The next character wasn't even trying to hide that he was a joke, he just forgot to be funny. Mocap debuted as a secret unlockable character in Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, a man literally wearing a motion capture suit covered in tracking balls. He was created as a tribute to Carlos Pacina, who performed mocap for Raiden. The concept could have worked as a fun Easter egg or a clever meta joke. It absolutely did not work. The problem was comprehensive and total. Mocap had no unique fighting styles, no weapon, and no finishing moves in Deadly Alliance. He borrowed everything from other characters. He had no story beyond some dude with martial arts knowledge who could inexplicably throw fireballs and teleport. He wasn't funny enough to work as comedy, and he wasn't developed enough to work as a legitimate fighter. WatchMojo ranked him among the worst MK characters ever, noting that as a joke, Mokip is not particularly funny. As a legitimate fighter, Mokip is shallow and underdeveloped. Combine those two, and the result is a character who has no reason to exist. Here's what made it worse. Community frustration targeted the wasted roster slot specifically. In Deadly Alliance, unlocking secret characters required significant effort grinding through the crypt. Players who spent hours unlocking content expected hidden gems like Noob Saibot or Ermac. Instead, they found a man in a ball-covered leotard doing borrowed moves. Nerd Bacon Reviews delivered the perfect eulogy, asking why would he wear his motion capture gear out and about? Doesn't he have any clue how ridiculous he looks walking around in a suit full of light bulbs? The comparison to successful joke characters makes Mokap's failure even more painful. Dan Hibiki in Street Fighter parodies the genre with genuine charm and personality. Makujin in Tekken has a clear training dummy concept and randomized movesets that create interesting gameplay variants. Mokap offered nothing. No humor hook, no gameplay innovation, no personality, no reason to exist beyond filling a character slot. He appeared in Armageddon because that game's entire gimmick required every character ever made, and he's never been seen since. Mokap exists only as a punchline in worst MK character discussions. A cautionary tale about what happens when you create a joke character without understanding what makes joke characters work, but at least Mokap was designed to be ridiculous. The next character was supposed to be taken seriously, but ended up breaking Mortal Kombat 11's entire competitive scene with one move. Shiva herself has been in Mortal Kombat since 1995, but her spot on this list is specifically earned by her MK11 Aftermath iteration in May 2020, and a single move that nearly destroyed the game's competitive credibility: the Dragon Drop Stomp. A Steam community user summarized the problem in 4 words that became a community mantra: full screen, aerial, unblockable, mix up. Let me break down why this move was so catastrophically broken. The Dragon Drop was unblockable, requiring a dodge instead of a block. It tracked your position automatically. It could be delayed anywhere between 1 and 30 frames, making dodge timing a pure guessing game. It could be aimed directionally in front of you, behind you, or directly on top of you. It had a 32% damage crushing blow, and the input was just down up. The simplest possible command in the game. Online lag made everything exponentially worse. One player documented that if the ping is above 68 milliseconds, a Shiva player can just infinitely stomp you over and over before you can even recover to backdash. An input registration bug during her airtime briefly registered backward inputs as forward, actively sabotaging your defense. The competitive community erupted in fury. PSN Profiles users reported that the credibility of Kombat League goes right out the window when you destroy the other player in the first match. Then they select Shiva and do nothing other than her stomp and fatal blow. A dedicated Twitter account called Scrub Quotes, but with MK11. Shiva stomps cataloged thousands of rage messages. Players were deliberately picking Shiva just to farm easy wins in ranked mode. The controversy peaked at the MK11 Pro Competition North American League, Week 2 in January 2021. Competitor Titanium Tigers reached top 8 playing Shiva with custom variations literally named "Why Did NRS Do This?" and Brain Off. NetherRealm disqualified him mid-match for the variation names, calling it a conduct violation. The community exploded. Kotaku, Event Hubs, and Reset Era all covered the story, with the consensus being damning. NRS programmed a broken move, then punished a player for pointing it out. NetherRealm eventually responded with nerfs across 2 patches. The May 13th, 2021 patch added 30 recovery frames on miss, narrowed the hitbox, fixed the variable delay, and reduced Shiva's health from 1000 to 950. The stomp went from game-breaking to borderline useless. Some felt NRAs overcorrect, but the damage to MK11's competitive reputation was already done after an entire year of stomp spam dominating online play. At least Shiva was an established character with a fanbase who got one broken move. The next character was a blatant ripoff who couldn't even steal properly. Cobra debuted in Mortal Kombat Deception in 2004 and represents the 3D era's character design philosophy at its absolute laziest. During development, his placeholder name was literally Ken Masters, not a codename inspired by Ken, just Ken Masters. When a German magazine received a beta copy of Deception, they published screenshots identifying the character as Ken, causing brief confusion about whether Street Fighter's poster boy was actually crossing over into Mortal Kombat. Spoiler alert, he wasn't. NetherRealm just forgot to change the name. The final product did absolutely nothing to escape the comparison. Blonde shoulder-length hair, white karate gi, fire-infused fists, chi blast projectile, teleport punch. Every single visual and mechanical element screamed bootleg Ken Masters. IGN described him as a Street Fighter character mixed with Johnny Lawrence from the Karate Kid. Screw Attack ranked him number 5 worst MK character ever, calling him a direct knockoff, only not being able to pull it off and turning him into a generic white guy. But here's what makes Cobra even worse than being a shameless ripoff. He's not even a good ripoff. Ken Masters is charismatic, has memorable quotes, iconic moves, and genuine personality. Cobra is just some angry dude. His backstory was painfully generic. A New York martial artist who got addicted to fighting and started murdering innocent people, then got recruited by Cabal into a reformed Black Dragon. In a franchise populated by thunder gods, undead ninjas, and dimension-conquering emperors, Cobra's entire identity was guy who does karate and has anger issues. TV tropes captured the community split perfectly. He's either a subversion of the Shoto clone archetype or a blatant ripoff of Ken Masters, and one of the worst characters of the franchise. Community consensus overwhelmingly chose the second interpretation. Every poll, every forum discussion, every worst character list placed Cobra near the bottom for being derivative, generic, and unnecessary. Cobra appeared in Deception, and Armageddon then was effectively retired. MKX confirmed his death via a throwaway interaction between Kano and Aaron Black, revealing Aaron had killed him off-screen. Zero ceremony, zero fanfare, just gone. He briefly resurfaced in MK1 as one of 3 fighters beneath the Ghostface DLC mask designated the Enforcer, still doing his trademark flaming flip kick. Even in death, Cobra remained too generic to earn a proper send-off. At least Cobra was just boring and derivative. The next character actively broke her own game with terrible boss design and even worse storytelling, becoming the worst main villain in Mortal Kombat history. Mortal Kombat 11's main antagonist debuted in 2019 as the franchise's first female final boss, a titan with power over time and mother of elder gods Citrian and Shinnok. She should have been terrifying. She should have been memorable. Instead, she's widely considered the worst villain in Mortal Kombat history. The Korean gaming Wiki Nama Wiki went so far as to call her the worst character in video game history. That's not hyperbole, that's documented community consensus. Her narrative problems were fundamental and unfixable. Kronika was introduced as a cosmic being who was there all along behind the scenes manipulating MK's entire timeline without any prior setup or foreshadowing across 30 years of storytelling. Test Your Might forum users identified the structural failure immediately. It's a bad idea to introduce a villain in a long-running story who was there all along without building them up first. It always feels contrived and it's almost never satisfying. Her motivation was maintaining cosmic balance between light and dark by resetting timelines, which was so vague that critics said she lacked a defined goal, and her scheme amounted to pure rage that someone lived a life she hadn't envisioned. But here's what made it worse. She had zero personal connection to the heroes. She never confronted them directly until the final fight, creating no dramatic tension whatsoever. Compare this to Shao Kahn's conquest-driven menace, Shang Tsung's devious cunning, or even Shinnok's personal vendetta against the Elder Gods. Kronika was a blank slate with cosmic powers. The villain's wiki states she's one of the least popular villains of the franchise, being regarded by the MK fandom as only existing so the developers had an excuse to reboot the series once again. The MK11 Aftermath DLC confirmed this perception when Shang Tsung effortlessly outplayed and manipulated her, reducing the supposed Supreme Titan to a pawn in his scheme. Her boss fight was mechanically atrocious and fundamentally unfair. Players could not throw her, could not use fatal blows, and many signature character moves simply didn't work. Combos were largely disabled because she would automatically teleport out after a set number of hits. Her ability kit included tracking orbs that froze you in time, healing spheres, and summoning duplicate fighters at 66% and 33% health thresholds. A Steam community discussion captured the universal frustration perfectly. If you have to break the game's mechanics to make the fight hard, you fucked up your job. On very hard difficulty, the fight was described as near impossible, with the common strategy being to literally spam 1 to 2 punch combos while walking forward. A joyless grind against a joyless character. Kronika failed as a villain narratively and mechanically, becoming a cautionary tale about introducing cosmic threats without proper build. But at least her failures were passive incompetence. The next character actively murdered fan favorites and became the most hated newcomer in modern Mortal Kombat. The chitin insectoid warrior first appeared in Mortal Kombat X in 2015 and returned in MK11 in 2019, earning a distinction no other MK newcomer holds. She has her own dedicated page on fandom's HateSync wiki. Event Hubs published an entire feature article titled How Devora Became Mortal Kombat's most hated character, despite being in just 2 games, comparing her killing of Melina to Brock Lesnar ending The Undertaker's WrestleMania streak, a shock that permanently enraged the fanbase. Her kill list reads like a war crimes tribunal against fan favorites. In MKX, she murdered Baraka by impaling him and ripping out his heart and brain. She killed Melina, one of the franchise's most popular characters with a massive passionate fanbase, by spewing flesh-eating insects into her mouth until her head was reduced to a bare skull. She backstabbed Kotal Khan and trapped Johnny Cage. Then MK11 escalated the carnage to an unforgivable level. Devora fatally stabbed Hanzo Hasashi, Scorpion, arguably the MK's single most popular character, from behind, while he was having an emotional moment with his past self. Community fury was seismic and sustained. Forum users raged that Noob Saibo would have been far more narratively satisfying as the killer than a 2-game newcomer. The Devora kills everyone meme became the defining community joke of the modern MK era. A Mortal Kombat Online thread titled literally "Fuck Devora" and her entire race expressed the community's sentiments without subtlety. Her third-person speech patterns, "This one serves Melina no longer," added an irritating verbal tick to an already loathed character. An accidental YouTube dynamic deepened the meme culture even further. Because Devora bleeds blue-teal blood, she was the only character whose fatality deaths wouldn't trigger YouTube's violent censorship. Content creators specifically performed fatalities on her to avoid demonetization, inadvertently spawning an entire genre of killing Devora content. Here's what separates Devora from pure design failures, like the characters we've covered so far. The hatred is complex and layered. In MT11, she was one of the absolute worst characters competitive. Slow normals, inconsistent hitboxes, almost no mix-ups. She landed near the bottom of every tier list and became the least played character online. Yet some fans genuinely respect her as a villain. They argue the hatred itself proves she's an effective antagonist. She generates real emotional responses in a genre where most villains are interchangeable. This paradox, despised by the majority, but grudgingly respected by a minority, makes her hatred uniquely complicated. But that minority remains very small, and the majority remains very loud. Devora earned her hatred through systematic destruction of beloved legacy characters, combined with terrible gameplay balance. She's a monument to how not to introduce a newcomer villain into an established franchise. Kill one fan favorite, and you generate heat. Kill 3, and you generate permanent community resentment. But even Devora's concentrated 2-game reign of terror can't compete with the character who's been universally despised for over 20 years. The character so hated that his own creators have spent 2 decades finding new ways to kill him. No character in fighting game history has been as comprehensively, systematically, and joyfully despised as Xu Hao. A Mongolian Red Dragon grappler with a cybernetic heart implant, he debuted in Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance in 2002 and has been dying ever since. WatchMojo ranked him #1 worst MK character ever. IGN called him the most universally disliked Mortal Kombat character of all time. Community forums across Reddit, GameFAQs, TRMK, Test Your Might, and MK Online have placed him at or near the bottom of every poll for over 2 decades. Fans have described him as the Jar Jar Binks of Mortal Kombat, a comparison that, if anything, undersells the contempt. His design problems are total and irredeemable. Originally codenamed Kublai Khan during development, Xu Hao was meant to be Jax's rival within the Red Dragon faction. The result was a generic military brawler with no distinctive MK flair, a boring wrestling sumo moveset, and a personality void where charisma should exist. His special moves, Thunderclap, Cyrus Stomp, Crystal Laser, were functional but completely forgettable. One community member called him a ripoff of a ripoff, a Kano clone based on Jarek, who was already a Kano clone. In a franchise defined by spectacle and excess, Xu Hao was aggressively mundane. But here's what elevates Xu Hao from merely bad to legendarily despised. His own creators openly hate him. Ed Boon tweeted in June 2009, "I don't hate any MK characters, but I was never a big fan of Xu Hao. Don't expect to see him return anytime soon." A Game Informer article confirmed that Xu Hao and Draman were Boon's least favorite characters. But the deepest hatred came from designer John Vogel, who declared Xu Hao's death in Jax's Deadly Alliance ending canon, specifically because he wanted to get rid of the character permanently. When Armageddon forced every character back onto the roster, Vogel included Xu Hao, much to his dismay, and wrote an ending where Xu Hao simply dies and becomes an empty demon. A hidden backwards audio message in MK Deception asks, "Will Xu Hao return from the dead?" Probably not. The MK franchise has turned killing Xu Hao into a recurring celebration. In MK MKX Comic Issue 1, he was the first major character killed. Scorpion speared his cybernetic heart, then punched through his face with a hellfire-covered fist on page 12 of the very first issue. Fans noted the poetic justice. Ed Boon's favorite character murdering his least favorite. In MK11, Aaron Black's default intro shows him carrying Shu Hao's severed head in a bag, which he casually drops on the ground. A background billboard advertises Shu Hao's watches. A cardboard cutout appears in the retrocade stage. Fujin mockingly calls Kano Shu Hao as an insult. Even a tower consumable fires Shu Hao's chest laser from off-screen. He's been reduced to a joke item. 23 years after his debut, Shu Hao remains the undisputed benchmark for character design failure in fighting games. He was the first character confirmed absent from MK9 and MKX. His name functions as shorthand for worst possible addition in any roster discussion. He transcended mere unpopularity to become a cultural institution within the MK community, a character whose hatred is so complete, so enduring, and so universally shared by fans and developers alike that he's achieved a perverse kind of immortality. Every new MK game finds a fresh way to humiliate him, and every fan cheers. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.